Alright, man, peace. So brothers, this video right here is going to be a continuation of a theme that I first broached about a couple of years ago called Shut Up and Dribble, which basically is an allusion to a phrase that was first put forth by Miss Laura Ingraham, one of the anchors at Fox News, who in an attempt, in her view, to try to encapsulate what the actual role of LeBron James and many other athletes is in this society, she really just stepped in it because it wasn't her place to say what she said, how she said it. But either way, I'm going to take what she said and run with it because the overall intention of her statement is accurate and correct. And if you're a wokety so-called black man, you're going to get very upset by that. How dare you agree with Laura Ingraham? She works for Fox News. That equals she's a racist. That means that LeBron James must be correct. No, he's not correct. But in the eyes of his wokety Caucasian liberal handlers, they understand how the low-level so-called emotional liberal black male thinks. They know that he quote-unquote thinks by implication, meaning what? If a Caucasian or so-called Caucasian who works for a quote-unquote conservative network attacks LeBron James, that helps the LeBron James brand. It makes him seem like a quote-unquote revolutionary because they've defined revolutionary as someone who is quote-unquote progressive. Basically meaning amoral, which for the most part is what LeBron James is. He tries to cast himself as this person who stands up for quote unquote what's right. But we have to ask ourselves, what makes something right to certain people? Is it based in a certain level of propriety or structure? Or is it all about tearing down the old to rebuild the new, but in whose image? LeBron James is a worshiper. He's a venerator of the GOAT, as I've told you brothers incessantly and gone about proving it. Very intricately, I may add, with the series of videos that I've done in the past, and I'll probably be updating it with even more information in the near future. Well, LeBron James recently, I won't say he was approached, but his stances were contested by another world famous athlete in the soccer world by the name of Zlatan Ibahimovic, or Ibahimovic, whatever his last name is. And he attempted to make a point to once again show, at least in his view, where LeBron James was going off or where he was going astray. But what Zlatan doesn't understand is that LeBron James is not sincere in his views. His end game is to use the wokety political banter and rhetoric to augment his profile. LeBron and the witch coven that he works for, that being Nike Incorporated, they've cast their lots in with globalism. So they don't care who they alienate here in America. I'm pretty sure that Nike has laid these things out for LeBron James many years ago, which is why he's so emboldened to quote unquote speak his mind, really just be a shill for the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party basically operates as a proxy for globalist Marxist forces. That's why they don't care about how people view them. They're going ham with the transgender shit, the homosexual shit, the toxic femininity shit, because they're getting bankrolled by globalist forces, both in Europe and in China. So they're all in bed with one another. People like Zlatan don't understand that. They don't grasp why LeBron James is so gung-ho about, certain political rhetoric. It's because he's receiving checks under the table from entities over in China, Europe, and America. Of course, everything that I'm saying is alleged. But whenever someone wants to understand why the average person is saying what they're saying, at least on a grand scale, when someone's very prominent or a so-called celebrity, just follow the money. That's it. When it comes to LeBron James, just follow the money. He's desperate to try to claw his way into quote-unquote billionaire status so that he can finally feel like he's a quote-unquote equal to his idol, Michael Jordan, the original 23. The original serpent god. But anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
All right, let's stick with LeBron James and an international soccer star who is going at LeBron James for speaking about social issues and politics. I am talking about Zlatan Ibahimovic, who...
If I were to ask someone to please make sure that you take all of LeBron James's most pivotal and important social quotes and put them in a book for me, I guarantee you that book would not be longer than one page. The way that the mainstream liberal media speaks, you would think that every time you turn around, LeBron James was making all of these unbelievably deep and important statements on modern day society. This dude barely talks about anything. And what was the most hilarious was when LeBron was first confronted about Zlatan's statements. And, you know, they both have the right to have their views or what have you, and the reasoning for their views. But when LeBron James lost me is when he said that he's educated. Now all of a sudden he's quote unquote educated. How the fuck could you claim education when, to be quite frank with you, your whole foundation, the very fiber of your being, the very fiber of how you were marketed, your archetype as an athlete, is based on you avoiding education by not going to college, by basically being moved around from school to school in junior high school and high school so that you could find the place that was best for you to market yourself as a potential professional athlete. Now all of a sudden you're an educator. Why is that? Because supposedly your name is on the school and you preside over it, supposedly. When in all actuality, once again, all they're doing is using LeBron James to market the school so that he can once again augment his profile overall as this quote unquote great guy who's there to save black people. And the LeBron James school is a public school. The public pays for that school, not LeBron James. It's no different than if you live here in New York and you go to Taft High School or Einstein High School or Washington Irving High School. High schools and schools in general are named after famous people. That does not mean that that person actually runs the school. That's what people don't grasp about the whole LeBron James thing when it comes to his school. He's not qualified to teach anybody, but he has the nerve to act like he's an educator now. Oh, I'm very informed on voter suppression. You're not informed on a fucking thing. All you know is what the elites in the Democratic Party tell you to say on TV. That's all you know.
Quite literally one of the greatest soccer football players in the world, and he recently sat down and did an interview, and I can't wait to hear your opinion on this, Renee, but he absolutely unloaded on LeBron. So let me set this up first. So Zlatan was asked about how he felt about athletes talking about politics, and here's what he had to say. He said, I like LeBron a lot, and he is phenomenal at what he's doing, but I don't like when people have some kind of status. They go and do politics at the same time what they're doing. Do what you're good at.
Basically what Zlatan was saying is that you should do one thing at a time, because if you're doing two major things at the same time, you're probably not putting in your best effort in either one. That's really what he was trying to say, and he was making relatively good points there. We know that LeBron is putting more energy into basketball. So then one has to say, if you're also participating in the political sphere, are you not, going the whole way with it, or are you just reading from a script? Because in order to be a full-time politician, you have to mingle with the people. Someone has to tell me the last time that you saw LeBron James walking down the street by himself. Since they love to market him as the modern-day Muhammad Ali, who always walked down the street and intermingled with the common folk, especially so-called black people. When's the last time that you saw LeBron James doing that? And I'm not saying that he should, because he's a world-famous superstar. And we know that there are a lot of jealous petty, silly niggas out here who would try to hurt him just because of where he is, in the totem pole of the global society. I'm not saying that he should. But if you're not going to do that, don't try to align or synchronize yourself with Muhammad Ali or any other figure who was always aligned in politics to a degree. And Muhammad Ali was not someone who willfully associated with politics. Now, he would speak about socio-politics, but not the actual political world involving presidents and governors and mayors, where he was trying to campaign for people, at least not until Elijah Muhammad passed away. So this person, Zlatan, is clearly doubting or trying to cast aspersions on what he views to be the legitimacy of LeBron James's comments about politics. He's saying that LeBron is half-stepping, and he is, but he's doing it for a purpose.
Do the category you do. I play football because I'm the best at playing football. I don't do politics. If I would be a political politician, I would do politics. This is the first big mistake people do.
Right, but it's not a mistake for LeBron James, because LeBron knows that he has an entire political party behind him. LeBron is not just stepping out there and making statements about race or society that he knows will not be agreed with by his witch coven Nike or by his political party, the Democrats. He stays according to party lines, and he speaks party doctrine.
they become famous and they become in a certain status. Stay out of it. Just do what you do best because it doesn't look good.
LeBron doesn't care. Once again, the NBA in particular has forsaken the quote-unquote American market or the American audience. They've cast their lots in globally. That's why they're going to such great pains to market Luka Doncic. They don't give a shit about how Americans feel about basketball anymore. They're moving more towards the European brand of basketball, more wide open, shooting threes, less contact under the rim, things of that sort. As a matter of fact, I think I heard Luka Doncic say that it was more physical over in Europe. But that's why they've jumped on his train, and there's a lot going on with Luka Doncic as well. I'm already on record as stating that beyond a shadow of a doubt, he's a Monarch programmed athlete, and that the number 77 that he wears stands for do what thou wilt, the credo of Aleister Crowley. But I'll be going into greater depth when it comes to that in other videos. And I believe 777 stands for order out of chaos.
That sounds like shut up and dribble to me coming from Zlatan.
Oh, that was the long version of shut up and dribble, and it's really surprising just because most athletes have been felt very empowered by having a voice.
Right, but are you qualified to be any more empowered than the average person just because you can kick a ball or shoot a basketball? There's a big difference between having an opinion and being placed in an exalted position by mainstream media strategically so that you can, put forth your quote-unquote opinion. Because we know that athletes, especially so-called black athletes who are anything other than super liberal, are quieted and they're shushed.
And I can just speak from the WNBA's perspective, and I know he was talking about,
in other words, the Women's National Basket Case Association perspective.
Do what you're good at, but a lot of the players, most of the women in the WNBA, we have a 4-year degree from a university, so...
Right, but who cares? What does that mean? If you have a 4-year degree... if you have a 4-year degree in communication so that you can become a broadcaster, does that mean that you're qualified to speak about geopolitical or socio-political issues?
Good at could be an array of things and not just basketball. And what's to say, for people that...
And beyond that, I think that he really was just speaking about LeBron James because, whenever someone's going to shoot a shot at someone or something, they're going to shoot a shot at whoever's at the pinnacle. And that's LeBron right now.
Second career, a second passion, an entertainer that's also a singer. So I guess Drake probably shouldn't sing and rap. He would probably think that Drake should just pick...
What a terrible comparison. Just pass it back to Babcock or whoever the fuck else is there with you.
One of those, and to me, I just think that people can do more than one thing, and I mean, everyone knows that.
I think that people can do whatever they're qualified to do. Everyone can't do more than one thing. That's why you have to be on the show where you're not involved in speaking with men that have backbones, because once you're questioned, you're going to fold up like a damn cheap lawn chair, as all liberal people do, particularly liberal females. As soon as you contest or combat their alleged beliefs, they're going to fold up.
I appreciate what LeBron James does because one of the things that he spoke out about kind of gave me a platform in the More Than a Vote. So that sounded like a long...
He didn't speak out about anything. That was a ploy utilized by the Democratic Party to get so-called black people out there to cast votes for them. They had to make or convince so-called black people that there was a concerted attempt being made to stop them from voting so that they would go out there to vote. As I've already stated in other videos, if you want people to do something, tell them that they can't do it or that there's this mysterious nebulous force out there that's trying to stop them from doing something. They used the state of Georgia to basically make America wholly quote-unquote Democrat, aka Marxist.
Version of, yes, shut up and dribble.
Yeah, I don't like it because anyone can talk about politics or societal issues or social justice. Everybody has the right. That's why we have free speech, and everybody is entitled to give their opinion.
Maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe there are too many people. Look, I've said this already. People should not have the so-called right to vote unless they have a particular IQ rating or IQ score. Just my view of it. It should be at least over 90 in order for you to have the right to vote, in my view. If you have a lower IQ than 90, you should not have the right to vote.
Say was, for fans out there or anybody, because somebody's a famous actor.
And I promise you, if LeBron James took an IQ test, it's going to come in under 90.
don't have to believe they're a political expert or put extra.
Now this right here is a Masonic pose, as we can see here, the downward pyramid. So could they be conveying that Mr. Zlatan Ibahimovic, his job is to act as the quote-unquote agent of chaos, to once again promote LeBron as the hero or hero? Who knows? We also see that he's wearing the black, white, and red for Pan. So there could be much more to this than meets the eye. There normally is. But just on a two-dimensional level, there's nothing wrong necessarily with what he said. But most of this is always going to be about brand building. LeBron James is the figure under attack because he's such a noble, significant component of this society when it comes to social change. He's always under attack. He's always being oppressed by a lot of exterior forces who are jealous of him. That's how they market him. They're trying to market him as the modern day Muhammad Ali.
Into what they say necessarily. Just because you're an athlete doesn't mean that you have all the answers or better answers. But
right.
If somebody can't speak about something, I mean, that's way out of line.
And I wonder, do they feel the same way about entertainers, about actors, about musicians? Because a lot of other people with status, I think what he's referring to, speak out. The reason I ask.
Right, but most of these so-called actors and entertainers and the other people that she mentioned are also just assets and pawns for the Democratic Party. Let me rewind this back just a little bit. Now, I wanted to return to this photo for a particular reason and just for a moment. As we can see here, the color scheme is the black and white, the bringing together of opposites. And of course, the color blue for the planet Saturn, the bringing together of opposites, the quote-unquote red and the blue for Saturn and the quote-unquote divine red for the sun god. So basically they're letting you know that LeBron James has risen to the status of a quote-unquote master. He no longer is an apprentice. In a very similar way, when Michael Jordan started his career, he wore the black, white, and red, predominantly red with the Chicago Bulls for bail. Then he retired. He no longer was an apprentice. He came back to play with the Washington Wizards. He was now a master wizard or a master sorcerer, and he wore the blue.
About entertainers, about actors, about musicians, because a lot of other people with status, I think what he's referring to.
Now they're showing Zlatan with the prayer hands. And once again, he's wearing the quote-unquote divine black, white, and red for Pan.
The reason I ask that is because there's this thing that people have with athletes that they're like, don't do it, just play sports. And it really blows my mind because...
It shouldn't blow your mind. The reason why people do that with athletes is because they've always associated athletes with physical dominance and a very high level of influence. So they don't want the so-called athlete to ruin the experience that they want to have when viewing them as someone who is the quintessence of physical mastery or splendor with what's coming out of their mouth. It's very much akin to a man who has a beautiful woman, huge breasts, fat ass, but he does not want to hear what she has to say because it's going to ruin the high for him. That's how people view athletes, basically just as props. And if you notice, they made sure that in the composition for this photo, along the left-hand side, you have the rainbow flag for Lucifer.
There's a lot of different people in other fields that do the exact same thing.
Yeah, you know what I think it is? I think it comes down to business a lot of times, Renee. Remember that famous quote that Republicans buy sneakers too?
Yes.
I think when you start taking strong political stances, it actually hurts your bottom line. So that's probably...
It would have hurt Michael Jordan's bottom line 30 years ago, but you have to understand it does not hurt LeBron James's bottom line now because the overall business schematic for Nike is different. They've gone 100% in to the globalist aspect. The Chinese market was nowhere near as prominent back in the late 80s, early 90s as it is today. So Nike's attitude is, look, we could lose hundreds of millions of dollars in the American market. We'll make that up overseas with China. LeBron just makes sure that you say what we need you to say.
Even more of a reason to respect athletes that speak up because they're probably hurting their bank accounts. But
LeBron James is not hurting his bank account. He's always going to be watched out for by his Democratic benefactors.
Means enough and they care enough to speak out, and that does.
Honestly, what would impress me is if LeBron James spoke out against the promotion of homosexuality lesbianism, and transgenderism, especially in the so-called black community, but we know he's never going to do that. One of his allegedly best buddies in the basketball world, Dwayne Wade, is being used to outrightly promote transgenderism, particularly amongst young so-called black boys. It is a concerted and a coordinated attack on black manhood as usual, and LeBron James has nothing to say about it because that's not part of the overall LeBron James script. He's not able to speak out about things like that. For all intents and purposes, there's no such thing as manhood anymore for the so-called black man, or at least the so-called black celebrity, to defend. They're taught that the only difference between man and woman is the exterior. Everything on the inside is the same. So therefore, there is no man or woman.
Really though, and I'm just saying, the WNBA, if you check the numbers, the WNBA viewership actually went up, and so I know that.
Oh, went up from one person to two people. Is that what you're saying? Now notice what they're showing here. Zlatan Ibahimovic is speaking to the crowd. This person is holding the phone. Of course, it's an Apple phone. The image of the apple with the bite taken out of it is, of course, meant to be an allusion to Adam and Eve accepting the teachings of the serpent. And on the ring finger of the person holding this phone, we see the pentagram. So there are a lot of hints being given in many of these photos as usual when it comes to the true source of this storyline between Zlatan and LeBron James. This is just more marketing for LeBron.
A lot of other sports leagues numbers went down. They tried to use that theory.
Right, but the other sports leagues, their numbers went down and the WNBA numbers went up because there's only one direction for the WNBA to go, is up.
And it didn't explain.
And believe me, that bump is not going to last very long. The reason why the WNBA numbers went up is because a lot of silly, low-level thinking liberal black females decided to turn on the WNBA once they used these broads to get a couple of those politicians elected/selected in Georgia, as well as getting Biden in the White House. I believe the cat's name is Raphael Warnock. That's the only reason why the WNBA's ratings had that little bump, but it's going to go right back down.
Golf numbers was down while the NHL was down, and so the numbers didn't support that go woke and go broke phrase that you're referring to. So that's just an excuse, and that's just a threat tactic. But the WNBA, the numbers was up. So
right, but once again, there's only one direction that the WNBA numbers can go. Let's see how long that lasts.
Know if that theory can hold.
Yeah, I think Zlatan is an amazing soccer player, one of the best. He's off here, though.
You see how they ended with that same pose? That's a Masonic pose right there. There are many other quote-unquote prominent celebrities who made that pose. Now, of course, this was in the midst of a soccer game, but they're showing this on purpose. As you can see, it is the inverted triangle for the quote-unquote mother goddess or the divine feminine. But we're going to continue this in another segment. Okay, so brothers, now we're going to pick up where we left off involving the quote-unquote narrative or storyline between Mr. LeBron James and Zlatan Ibahimovic. Let's see what else they have to say here.
Welcome back to the show. My name is Evan, along with WNBA's newest owner, Renee Montgomery.
Hello there.
All right, this is a big deal, especially considering your role in this next story. Everybody knew Zlatan Ibahimovic, the international soccer superstar, the comments that he made to LeBron last week, where he criticized LeBron, saying essentially athletes should stick to sports and don't get involved in politics. Stick to what you're good at. Don't get involved in politics. He said, do what you do best because it doesn't look good to get into other things like that. Well, LeBron James late Friday night responded to Zlatan, and when he did, he referenced our very own Renee Montgomery, who went from WNBA superstar, 11 seasons in the league, to becoming the first person ever to go from player to co-owner of a franchise. She's now the co-owner of the Atlanta Dream. We're talking about it.
All right, but what does that really mean? The co-owner of the Atlanta Dream. What percentage of the team does she own? And what is that what is that team worth on the market? I probably could buy her out.
Proud of her for that. Also, LeBron James is proud of her for that and mentioned you specifically.
How come LeBron James? I mean, how come LeBron James didn't say, you know what? I want to buy a piece of the Atlanta Dream. hold on to that stake until I retire. How come he just helped her get it? Maybe he knows that it ain't worth shit.
He was asked about Zlatan's comments on Friday evening. Take a look.
Do you have any response to what he said?
Nah, absolutely not. I mean, because at the end of the day, I would never shut up about things that's
lucrative for me and things that I need to say to make sure that my people in the Democratic Party do what they got to do. Because, they told me if I say certain things, they'll put me in more movies and help me make more money because I need money to, eventually buy a basketball team. And I'm trying to catch Michael Jordan because I hate that nigga now because that nigga won't accept me. So I'm trying to take him down and I need all help I can get.
That's wrong. I preach about my people and I preach about...
You don't preach about a fucking thing. How the fuck can you preach unless you're a teacher and a preacher? You're neither one of those things. You can't name one thing that you've preached about other than so-called black people are scared to death whenever they see the police, which is a lie. That's something that you yourself are trying to promote to once again, do the normal democratic tactic of black man equals victim. You don't even know what the hell you think about anything, bro. Just knock it off.
Equality, social injustice.
Do you believe in equality, LeBron James? Do you believe that you're equal to everyone else or that you're better than everyone else? How can a king preach equality? That makes no sense. The term king, in and of itself, intrinsically, what it denotes and connotes is superiority. So how could you preach equality and call yourself a king?
Racism, systematic.
What's the word that they taught me? Systematic oppression and voter suppression. Yeah, that's what they told me. That's what Gavin Newsom and Nancy Pelosi told me to say.
Voting, voter suppression.
You see that? Voter suppression. That place.
Things that go on in our community. There's no reason. I won't say no reason, but there's no way I will ever just stick to sports because I understand how.
You had to catch yourself. He said there's no reason or no way. So that means there is a reason. One of the reasons why you stuck to sports was what? China last year. So he had to correct himself real quick because he remembers shit. If I say no reason, they're going to come back and say, what about China?
How this platform and how powerful my voice is.
Powerful to woke idiots and little dudes 25 years and younger who don't know any better. Those are the only people paying you any mind.
And he can just ask Renee Montgomery, if I would have shut up and just dribbled. Seeing that beautiful black woman today.
Renee Montgomery, that beautiful black woman. You gonna say all that shit on TV. I hope that you're hitting it. But we know that you're not because, number one, when you do step out from your wife, you prefer to deal with blonde hair, blue-eyed white girls. We know that's a fact because they talk about how you try to hit on them all the time on social media. Most of the time you fail. But beyond that, how the hell could she be a beautiful black woman if she's a lesbian? The purpose of the woman here on the earth is as a wife and a mother. She's neither one of those things. But the real question begs to be asked. Why is it all of a sudden that all of this energy is moving towards Renee Montgomery? Who is she? That's what really bears investigating. Who is this person, Renee Montgomery, that everybody wants to shout her out all of a sudden for doing nothing? There's a person who allegedly quit the WNBA to become more involved in social activism, and all she did was stand out there on the street and pass out water bottles to liberal whites and homosexuals that supposedly were marching for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. What is it exactly that these niggas are doing? Have any laws been changed at all in the aftermath of all this protesting that they supposedly did? By the way, does anybody have any footage of LeBron James at even one protest? How is it that he's the leader of anything and that he's a preacher for anything, but he did not make one appearance at a protest or a rally anywhere? What's the reason for that? What are people going to say? Well, he was trying to avoid getting coronavirus because, he wanted to get back out there on the court. Well, if that's the case, then you're basically nullifying any attempt to project yourself as a societal leader. If you put the basketball over that. But once again, if you truly believe that the mask is going to stop you from contracting the coronavirus, why didn't you just head out there with the mask on? Grab a microphone and do your LeBron James thing and preach to the people, right? Unless you couldn't preach, unless you had a pre-written speech. So there's so much going on with these characters. It's just hilarious. And then we know the guy goes into the bubble with the Malcolm X biography that was still on page 1. Really page 0.5, because he was just on the inside of the front cover. This nigga never read not one page of that book. But notice nobody asked him about it. Hey, LeBron, what's the update on the Malcolm X book? How's it going?
Be a part of a group where she's part of an ownership group now with the Atlanta Dream down in Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean, he spoke very highly of you and pointed to you as a
Of course, he's a politician, so he has to use her as a talking point. LeBron never does anything for people and then not mention it. Everything that he does, he has to make sure that everybody knows about it. That's why a lot of these dimwits, they get so upset with Jordan, because Jordan is not a politician. The things that Jordan does, he does not let people know. LeBron James makes sure everybody knows it. But that's another thing that's interesting. LeBron supposedly was so gung-ho for Joe Biden and against Donald Trump. But where's the photo of LeBron James at the voting booth? This guy takes photographs of everything that he does where he wants to promote himself and his brand. How come we have not seen a photo of LeBron James casting a vote for Joe Biden? Could it be that he didn't vote?
who you sat out the 2020 season to focus on working on social injustice initiatives and focusing on issues off the basketball court. And obviously LeBron has a ton of respect for you for doing that, and also the fact that now you have risen to the ranks of the ownership level. It's incredible. So what goes through your mind when you see LeBron James sitting in front of the media and saying all these things about you like that?
My first thought is I don't know why someone would go at him. That's one, just because he's
a pathological liar, an attention whore, and a Luciferian. Maybe that's why.
That he's going to, like, he even said it, he's like, I'm going to do my homework before I come back at you. That's one. But two, for him to know that this is a superstar in the soccer league, and he's a superstar in the basketball world and just in the world in general, and he knew that was a big moment. And so the first thing that comes to my mind is like, wow, he made sure to share that moment with me on purpose. And so
yes, because he was using you as a pawn. Everything that he does or acts like he does for anybody else, he has to make sure that everybody else knows.
And he's just incredible. Like, he's been incredible support to me. And I love that he's Team Atlanta Dream now. I'm just saying it, like, he better be Team Dream.
It's really amazing.
That's why I asked, how come he did not make sure that he had a portion of the team under his ownership banner as well, unless he knows that there's no profit in it? That's how you know this bro is just getting used.
So when he says stuff like that, I know that he's praising you publicly, but what's the relationship like with LeBron behind the scenes? And
now, brothers, you see how he asked that question? He said, I know that he's praising you publicly, but what's the relationship like behind the scenes? In other words, what he's implying is that he knows that LeBron James is just using her as a political bargaining chip.
And what is he doing to kind of help support you?
The thing about it is he's so involved in the sense of he makes sure things get handled. And I can appreciate that because there's only so many hours in a day. People always ask me all the time, like, how do you get things done? And I'm like, I have a team, of course. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I have a team behind me that makes everything kind of roll. He has the same. And so while shouting out LeBron, I have to shout out his team because they're unbelievable. Adisu, Adam, his right-hand man, like, they just make sure things get done. And so that's how they've helped me. They've made sure things get done for me.
In other words, LeBron James people speak to you. You probably have never spoken to LeBron James but one time in your damn life. You might have had one interaction with him. But LeBron makes sure that his people are able to get you in contact with the right politicians so that you're able to buy the team, because even most of these owners of these various sports teams are just an extension of the political world.
It's like some things you can't plan for, like it's just a blessing, like the timing of how everything worked. And even with how I sat out last year, that's just a blessing. Like I couldn't have manufactured that. But the other stuff, it's crazy because even here, like when I first said I was going to start rolling with TMZ Sports, I didn't know that I was going to be doing all these different things. But honestly.
Right. But once again, you're a bargaining chip. The reason why you're even on TMZ is because that other idiot, that black charlatan, Robert Littal, I call him a charlatan because he was on TV all the time trying to act as if he treated women so well and he was so enlightened. The reason why he was removed is because it was recently revealed and exposed that he spent the vast majority of his time at Black Sports Online sexually harassing the black women who were there. So TMZ fired him very unceremoniously and never gave an explanation why he was removed. A brother sent me a link that explained why Robert Lataw was removed, and that's how this broad got her job in the first place. And they went all the way in. They said, we're not just going to hire a woman, we're going to hire a black woman, we're going to hire a lesbian black woman. So that is the modern state of affairs on TV.
You guys have helped me break every story, and so that makes it more viral and bigger. And so
helped her break every story. Does anybody really care that you own a portion of the Atlanta Dream? It's not no damn broken story.
It's a perfect storm. It really just turned into the perfect storm, and it's crazy.
Well, you're doing an amazing job, and it's not just us to feel that way. When it's coming from LeBron James, it must truly feel great. So congratulations on everything.
Bullshit. There's more than meets the eye going on here. This person, Renee Montgomery, no doubt about it in my mind, is most likely an Eastern Star, a worshiper of ISIS/Assad, much like the wives of LeBron James, Chris Paul, Carmelo Anthony, Dwayne Wade, etc. She's an Eastern Star. Very little doubt about it in my mind.
You can just ask Renee Montgomery.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. We'll see where things go involving this storyline between LeBron James and Zlatan Ibahimovic. So peace.